We are audiostack.ai.
Combining AI writing, the best synthetic voices,
with production and delivery.
Be it ads, podcasts, or VOs for video.
Just like this ad.
How would you utilize AI audio? For free.
Go to audiostack.ai/contest.
Give us just a few details.
And you could replace this spot and be heard by millions.
See webpage for T's and C's. audiostack.ai/contest.
Hey everyone, heads up, this episode contains an undercover F-bomb. You've been warned. On Sunday night, Lauren Windsor went online to tell her tens of thousands of followers that she had big news. And to be honest, she wasn't lying. Lauren had gotten herself invited to a dinner at the Supreme Court. She showed up posing as an eager conservative, a Catholic, a fangirl. And the whole time, she was recording.
I think that it's a matter of, winning.
I think you're probably right. I mean, one side or the other is going to win. I don't know.
This is Lauren talking to Justice Samuel Alito. He wrote the decision that brought down Roe v. Wade. Lauren prods him into talking about religion.
I think that the solution really is, winning the moral argument. People in this country who believe in God have got to keep fighting for that, to return our country to a place of godliness.
Oh, I agree with you.
Over the course of this week, Lauren's released one recording after another. A conversation with Chief Justice John Roberts, even a chat with Justice Alito's wife, Martha Ann. Weeks after the New York Times reported that the Alitos hung politically inflammatory flags in front of their homes in Virginia and New Jersey, Martha Ann told Lauren her flag flying days were far from over.
You know what I want? I want a Sacred Heart of Jesus flag because I have to look across the lagoon at the Pride flag for the next month.
Exactly.
And he's like, oh, please don't put up a...
Listening to this tape, it's hard not to feel a mess of emotions. First, there's what these tapes reveal about the justices themselves. Lauren's recordings of the Alitos, in particular, seem both utterly shocking and totally unsurprising. But also, there are real questions about the way Lauren got her scoop, by lying about who she is and what she believes. It's worth noting we have not verified these recordings ourselves. I don't even know what to call Lauren Windsor. A journalist? An advocate?
Lauren Windsor, Gonzo masochist. I mean, I'm not a morning person, and I already got up at 6 o'clock to go on NPR. And I went to sleep after 3 a.m.
This is how Lauren Windsor describes herself these days.
I've had a string of nights of 3 hours of sleep. So masochist, I think, is fitting.
Lauren says it's a lot easier to get the justices to talk off the cuff if you're okay bending some journalistic rules. This is actually the second time she's gotten the justices on tape by simply buying a $500 ticket to the Supreme Court Historical Society's annual dinner and then showing up fully wired. Do you think you're going to be able to simply buy a ticket to the Supreme Court Historical Society dinner next year?
Well, I would say no, because I've been reached out to by the Epoch Times. I think there are maybe a couple of other conservative outlets that wanted me to comment on the Supreme Court Historical Society, saying that they revoked my membership, which is funny because I haven't gotten any notification from Supreme Court Historical Society itself saying that.
Was the reaction what you expected?
I mean, I think it still remains to be seen. I've been just kind of hectic, going. So I haven't been able to fully digest all of that. But for me, the greatest impact that I'm chasing is to, have real change occur.
Today on the show, behind the Gonzo tactics that have raised a whole lot of messy questions about the Supreme Court. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This episode is brought to you by Washington Wise. Decisions made in Washington affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Listen to Washington Wise, an original podcast for investors from Charles Schwab, to hear stories making news right now. Host Mike Townsend, Charles Schwab's managing director for legislative and regulatory affairs, takes a nonpartisan look at the stories that matter most to investors, including the policy initiatives for retirement savings, taxes and trade, inflation fears, the Federal Reserve, and how regulatory developments can affect companies, sectors, and even the entire market. Mike and his guests offer their perspective on how policy changes could affect what you do with your portfolio. Download the latest episode and follow at schwab.com/WashingtonWise or wherever you listen. This episode is brought to you by Discover. When it comes to your finances, Discover wants you to know they are the credit card that is always there for you. With 24/7 U.S.-based live customer service, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, that means no more waiting for, quote, normal business hours just to get a hold of someone. We are talking real service from real people whenever you need it. Get the customer service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. Lauren Windsor's had a real mashup career. She's worked as a political consultant for groups like the Lincoln Project, but she also collects audio and videotape. She's making a film she calls Gonzo for Democracy. As part of that, she's gotten pretty good at getting people in positions of power to drop their guards. Before he got elected Virginia's governor, Lauren got Glenn Youngkin to confess to a less forgiving stance on abortion than he wanted to admit on the campaign trail. She told Mike Pence that she was at the Capitol on January 6th, and he told her he loved her heart. The thing that struck me about Lauren's latest operation is just how out in the open it all was. Lauren signed up for the Supreme Court Historical Society. Then she bought a ticket to the annual gala.
You know, I registered for the event in my own name as Lauren Windsor. I walked in the Supreme Court building with a ticket as a registered attendee.
Were you in a disguise or anything?
No, I just a nice dress that I thought would appeal to.
I can't imagine going shopping and thinking, what would Justice Alito think of this dress?
I feel like I know their aesthetic, having grown up in the South, really swimming in the waters of the conservative sea.
You have been surreptitiously recording Republicans for years now at this point. You've recorded people like Senator Tommy Tuberville, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, former Vice President Mike Pence. And your usual approach is to pose as kind of a fangirl and just see what you can get them to say. How did you begin to think, I should be focusing on the Supreme Court?
Well, I will key into something that's journalistically important to me, like, often Wall Street related, corruption related, and women's reproductive rights. And so as Roe was being overturned, like, I was definitely doing a lot of accountability reporting on exposing Republican. Would they try to go after contraception? Would they try to get rid of the pill or ban the pill? And so what happened was in 2023, the thing that finally incited me to become a member was the ProPublica reporting on Clarence Thomas. And, it was, I guess, reported on at the time that he, was fond of these dinners. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I can sort of piggyback on ProPublica's reporting. Maybe there's something there that I can help to bring to light. And, I ended up talking to Justice Alito the first year, and it just didn't happen to be newsworthy at the time.
Yeah. Let's talk about what the justices said to you this year. You initiated a conversation with Justice Alito about his faith. You told him you were Catholic, right?
I did, and I actually grew up Catholic, so that's not a lie. I'm just not a practicing Catholic.
Yeah. You got him to say that one side or the other is going to win a culture war. He said, there can be a way of working and living together peacefully, but it's difficult because there are differences on fundamental things that can't really be compromised. And that was so interesting to me because it was just so plain, the way he said it. How heavily edited is the tape you released?
It's really not heavily edited. I mean, I try to provide the entire conversation with regards to the relevant part. I cut at the end of the 2024 thing with Alito, the part where we get interrupted because it goes into a conversation with a judge from New York that's not germane to this at all. But I included the entirety of the conversation that was about the polarization.
In the end, you spoke to not just Alito, but Chief Justice John Roberts. And I think it's interesting to compare how Alito was with you to how Chief Justice Roberts was.
I don't know if it's normal. I mean, since I've been here almost 20 years, there have been quieter times. But the idea that the court is in the middle of a lot of tumultuous stuff going on, that's nothing new.
Because he was so much more guarded. It was almost like he knew he was being recorded.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I knew that he would be the hardest to talk to because he's the Chief Justice. He's going to exhibit a higher degree of discretion, even in a body of jurists that's already going to be very hard to penetrate that discretion level.
And then in an opposite way, Martha and Alito, how did you get her to talk? Because it didn't seem like it took a lot to get her to talk about things.
I ideally wanted to wait until after the dinner. People are generally more talkative once they've had a few glasses of wine. They're unwinding. It's perfect, I think, for me to talk to her after the dinner. And that's where the wine, I think, really played a part in this. I can't speak to what her level of intoxication was, but my perception of that was that she was fairly tipsy, given that a woman named Kat walked by and she meowed at her several times.
Bye, baby. Bye, cat. Meow, 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 meow. Meow, meow. She's a bad girl.
The dinner ended. She was really like the center of attention. She is very enthusiastic, lively. She has a brash sort of personality. So coming up to her, I wanted to meet her brashness, but then push it a little to see how far it would go. So, it was cursing a fair amount, which...
Yeah, you kept cursing, and I was like, is she making a mistake? Is she doing this on purpose to try to draw Martha Ann out? I couldn't tell.
If you look at the conversations with Justice Alito and Justice Roberts, I'm clearly not cursing, right? So I felt like it was a way to gain a certain level of intimacy and project my empathy for her situation.
Like, a lot of people fly that fucking flag.
Don't worry about it, baby.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I should watch my language.
It's all right. It's all right.
I'm sorry. I did not.
I'm so angry. She's like, it's okay. It's okay. What do I care? Like, but it just makes me so angry.
What was the most surprising thing she said to you? Like, of all the things she said, what was the one where you were like, whoa?
The meowing was a lot, but I think it was probably when she was talking about the flags and saying that it satisfies her, and she's making this shame flag, Vergonia.
There'll be all kinds. I made a flag in my head. This is how I satisfy myself. I made a flag. It's white, and it's yellow and orange flames around it, and in the middle is the word Vergogna. Vergogna in Italian means shame. Vergogna, Vergogna, Vergogna. Shame, shame, shame on you.
According to Lauren's tape, this imagined Vergogna flag is something Mrs. Alito would fly as a response to a pride flag she saw in the house of a neighbor.
That was pretty shocking to me for her to speak in such aggressive terms about getting vengeance against the LGBTQ community. Wouldn't it be a delicious irony if every single one of her neighbors started flying pride flags? How funny would that be?
After the break, these tapes may be revealing, but does this type of journalism cross a line?
It's hard to imagine a world where we leave future generations with fewer rights and freedoms. The Supreme Court has stolen the constitutional right to control our bodies. Now politicians in nearly every state have introduced bills that would block people from getting the essential sexual and reproductive care they need, including abortion. Planned Parenthood believes everyone deserves access to care. It's a human right. We won't give up and we won't back down. Help ensure the next generation can decide their own futures. Donate to Planned Parenthood. Visit plannedparenthood.org/future.
We are audiostack.ai.
Combining AI writing, the best synthetic voices,
with production and delivery.
Be it ads, podcasts, or VOs for video.
Just like this ad.
How would you utilize AI audio? For free.
go to audiostack.ai/contest.
Give us just a few details.
And you could replace this spot and be heard by millions.
See webpage for T's and C's. audiostack.ai/contest.
Do you ever listen back to the conversations you have on tape and cringe a little bit? Because you're playing this part when you speak to the justices. Like, you talk about your husband, who I think is non-existent. Does it feel manipulative to get tape in that way?
I mean, does it feel manipulative to me? No, it doesn't, because, I feel that this is in service of a greater public good. And, my lying about my background is pretty inconsequential. I mean, this is, coming up in the context of a conversation with a virtual stranger.
You're saying if they'll talk like this to a total stranger, like, we should all listen.
Exactly. It's not, let's talk about like consequential lies. What is my lie at the end of the day? What is it resulting in? It's resulting into a window, hopefully, like eliciting some kind of response from a Supreme Court that's shrouded in secrecy. Whereas the lies that the justices tell, lies of omission, leaving off, disclosures of millions of dollars, isn't that the more substantive lie? Isn't that the thing that people should be concerned about?
I mean, what you're doing does not conform to traditional journalistic rules. And some have criticized you for that. I kind of wonder what your rules for yourself are, since you're making your own. Like, do you think about things you wouldn't do to get the tape, or things you wouldn't do to expose people that you disagree with politically?
Sure. I have this conversation all the time. It's funny because people want to compare me to James O'Keefe.
From Project Veritas.
In Project Veritas.
James O'Keefe is kind of like Lauren Windsor's Republican mirror image. He got famous in right-wing circles for orchestrating sting operations with his activist group, Project Veritas, although his videos were deceptively edited, and he broke wiretapping law to make some of them. His investigations shut down a major Democratic-leaning nonprofit and hobbled a consulting firm, Democracy Partners, where Lauren Windsor got her start.
I have some history there because they infiltrated my firm in 2016, and then we engaged in a long legal battle with them, which we ultimately won. But I wouldn't engage in a lot of the tactics that he engages in the name of going undercover. And I've talked to victims of this. They have used dating apps to target people. So going on dates with someone, actually like kissing someone, leading someone on to believe that there's a romantic interest there. I definitely wouldn't ever do that. I, wouldn't record someone, try to, do it in a bathroom or private place. It's got to be a public place with no expectation of privacy.
That's interesting. Yeah, Project Veritas, of course, they bought Ashley Biden's diary. I guess that's the kind of thing that maybe you might not do as well.
If someone said, hey, I have Steve Bannon's diary, do you want to buy it? I mean, that's not something that is very appealing to me. I just feel like it's kind of dirty. Again, I think that if there's an expectation of privacy on something, that definitely makes it harder to justify. Another thing is that I try to really only ever do this with public figures. And I say try. I don't recall ever going undercover with anyone who wasn't a public figure. I don't think it's okay to target civilians, you know? It's got to be like, are you a public figure? Do you have an obligation to the public? And is there a reason for me to believe that you are acting in opposition to that or in some bad faith way that I'm trying to expose?
I'm curious to you what it means for the work you're doing to be successful. You mentioned this comparison with James O'Keefe from Project Veritas. And I feel like part of what made him successful when he was successful was that he worked hand in glove with Republicans and people in Washington and people in power. They seized on what he was doing and used it for their own ends. And I'm not sure that your work is being seized on in that way by progressive forces. How do you feel about that? Like, I see it on the news. I don't see congressional hearings yet about it, you know?
And I would love to see congressional hearings. I've advocated for that. I believe that we need more transparency. I believe congressional hearings absolutely are the way to go. I've, funnily enough, had my reporting seized upon by Donald Trump. So in 2020, I was in Georgia for the runoffs and talked to Tommy Tuberville and was able to break the story that there was going to be a Senate objection to the Electoral College.
Because Tuberville was like, we're going to get Trump in, screw the election. We're going to get him in Congress.
I said, what are you going to do to fight for President Trump? And he was like, you seen what they're doing over in the House. We're going to have to do it in the Senate, too. I also spoke to David Perdue, and Trump tweeted out both of those stories.
Yeah. When you see Donald Trump is seizing on what the work you're doing, but maybe not as many people who are Democrats, and you're actually, that's kind of your audience, the Democrats. Do you feel like that's a missed opportunity?
I don't think it's just the Democrats. I think it's Democrats and Republicans. And the point here is to provide more information to everybody. I can only do what I can do. I can only report and expose and get it out in the world. I can't force anybody's hand. I would love for progressives, for Democrats, for centrists, for never Trump Republicans, moderates, all over the political spectrum to see it and be like, wow, people armed with information should act on it. That's the point of being an advocacy journalist. I think that the Democratic space is so underfunded and so balkanized. It's just a whole lot less coordinated than the Republican space.
You know, when you spoke to Martha Ann Alito, it was clear that she had a lot of grievances and that she remembered people for years who she felt aggrieved towards. She remembered a journalist from 2006 who made fun of her clothes.
And that was early in the conversation without any, I had no idea of this interaction. It's not like I was in 2006 reading about Robin Givhan's critique of her lazy boy patterned shirt or whatever it was.
Yeah. Do you worry that you may be Martha Ann's biggest target now?
Oh, for sure. For sure. When I walked out of there, I was definitely thinking to myself, there's a lot of power here that's going to come after me. We're talking about, these are very powerful people. We're hitting the hornet's nest of, the legal conservative movement. And Martha Ann Alito clearly has some very mafia-like tendencies.
What does all that attention mean for how you operate in the future? I mean, I noticed with this series of recordings, you worked with a colleague, a woman named Allie. I wondered a little bit if you were training other people because you've been doing this a while. People may start to recognize you.
Yes. So I have to work with colleagues. It's safer for me to not go solo. It's also just makes more sense. But the thing is, it's very hard to find people who want to engage in this type of work because it's not easy. It's confrontational. People might get really excited about it at first and then do it. And they're like, thanks for the experience. I had a fun time, but not interested anymore.
That's interesting to me. I didn't know it was hard to find people to do this work.
it is incredibly hard to find people on the left, on the liberal side of the spectrum, to engage in this type of work, because people hate politics as it is generally, but then to put themselves in a situation where they're confronting people with power, I think for a lot of people, there's might be too much risk involved. They don't want to deal with any possible blowback professionally or personally. So you really have to be a political animal to enjoy this type of work.
Lauren, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Mary.
Lauren Windsor is an activist and documentarian. And that is our show. If you're a fan of What Next, the best way to support our work is to join Slate Plus. Go on over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. What Next is produced by Paige, Osburn, Elena, Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. We are led by Alicia Montgomery with a little boost from Susan Matthews. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.
We are audiostack.ai.
Combining AI writing, the best synthetic voices,
with production and delivery.
Be it ads, podcasts, or VOs for video.
Just like this ad.
How would you utilize AI audio? For free.
Go to audiostack.ai/contest.
Give us just a few details.
And you could replace this spot and be heard by millions.
See webpage for T's and C's. audiostack.ai/contest.